How do you think about systems, and help us think about, for let's say we're a first level manager or maybe a manager of managers, what role do systems play in how we show up and how we lead others?
I learned this through my own experience and then also watching other people. They went out to some of these places and then ultimately got dismissed or failed or got fired. And I was like, what's the gap? I'm finding that leading others is really understanding the context of the organization. The leaders who are self-aware the most seem to be always the best leaders. So when we talk about leading yourself, it's really trying to dive into, and when I'm working on coaching with people, is working and talking through them, like, what are their motivations? Why are they doing these things? The values act as guide rails for people a lot of the time. Senior leaders, owners of companies often have the largest influence on how that culture thrives and works. So this is where I try to teach the middle management piece, because they can sometimes only make their immediate bubble or people within arm's length of them safe within all of their values.
My very special guest is the founder of From Within and a leadership coach who helps middle managers lead with clarity and confidence. He has over 2 decades of experience in founder-led companies where he has led teams, built leadership development programs, and has turned around underperforming divisions across the country. He coaches middle managers one-on-one on Instagram and through his email newsletter, The Manager's Minute. He is Aaron Wagner. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so happy to be here. I'm grateful to be a part of your show here today.
It's going to be exciting. We had such a great initial conversation. Just really loved all the work that you're putting out on social. And really this kind of, you and I kind of have come up in different industries, but going from these people that were kind of learning the management ropes to then becoming developers of other leaders. It's just been a really gratifying sort of a transition and journey. And I'm just so glad that you've had similar experiences. So I couldn't wait to talk to you.
Absolutely. I feel the same way.
Well, and for our audience, just listening in, you have this tremendous background with real estate teams specifically, and you made this transition from working with them a little bit more kind of hands-on directly, but then developing leadership programs for people within that real estate industry. I just wonder if you can get us started there. And like, what was that moment or that experience that you've had that made you realize that leaders, especially those in real estate, I guess, that really need sort of this intentional leadership development and support?
Yeah, I found it over and over again where good leaders will always learn to be good leaders, but it just takes longer and it's more painful when you don't have help. So when I've been in the real estate space for around 12 years and I did the job myself. And when I did the job, I learned a lot of things the really hard way and thought, gosh, if other people didn't have to learn it this way, it would be awesome. So I've been building leadership development programs inside of that space for a number of years. And it was honestly last year just going through some self-reflection and talking to people outside the immediate world that I was in. And they said, oh, Aaron, I wish we had that here too. I'm in medical. I wish I had that here too. Or I'm in manufacturing. I wish I had that here too. And so I said, yeah, I have learned a lot of things. Why don't I help share it with more people?
That's so cool. And it's so true. The context changes, from medical to manufacturing, but the core is always very similar. I shouldn't say always, but there's definitely some foundational elements that don't go changing. And so I think we'll probably dig into some of that today, but it's so great. I mean, when people started reaching out to you, what did your immediate thought was like, oh yeah, I guess it kind of sounded like a flashbulb went off for you.
Yeah, it was like a revelation where it's like, oh yeah, I have been working with these people. And then I realized, like, to your point, some industries are different, but people are often still people. And hard conversations and giving feedback and how to hire people and fire people. All those things translate bigger and above industry.
Yeah, and you do get to this point where when you've spent some time working on yourself and developing and elevating your own skills, it's very rewarding when somebody comes and recognizes that and says, oh, could you help me with that? Could you teach that? And I feel like a big reason I started this podcast, to be honest with you, was having gotten a little gray in the whiskers, being interested in giving back. And like you said, just trying to make it a little bit easier for people coming up behind who might, can we save them some of the trouble? That's really, really powerful.
Absolutely.
But I love when we had our conversation, you were talking to me about a 3-part leadership development framework, and it really resonated with me. It's something that I've thought a lot about too. And I thought we could maybe pull it apart a bit. And one of the first things that you talk about is leading yourself. And I wonder if you might just tell us, like, what are some of those real key skills or abilities? Like what goes into this practice, if you will, of leading yourself?
Yeah, leading yourself. I think the best leaders consistently, no matter the industry, no matter the experience, age, any of those things, the leaders who are self-aware the most seem to be always the best leaders. So when we talk about leading yourself, it's really trying to dive into, and when I'm working on coaching with people, is working and talking through them, like, what are their motivations? Why are they doing these things? Their values. The values act as guide rails for people a lot of the time. Like, one of my values is like home is foundation. So if I know that's true for me, then I want to be a part of an organization where I can keep that a priority. Otherwise, there's going to be lots of friction and a lot of pain in my life and the life of the organization. And so, yeah, knowing strengths and weaknesses and character flaws and all those types of things is really being able to lead yourself. So the best way I would describe it is leading yourself is just leading, but being able to hold a mirror and having coaches or friends or colleagues reflect back to you with honesty, and then learning from those things so that you're just the best version of yourself that you can be.
Down to say, why is it that I hate going to this meeting so much? It's one recurring meeting. Well, maybe there's something there, that there might be a values conflict. Maybe there's something, maybe it's time to hit the reboot on it or something. And I think that willingness to reflect, like whether you're driving, whether you're into journaling, I think that we, as leaders, we would do well to hit the pause button and take a look back and say, like, have I really examined all of the things? Like, yeah, that's hugely important.
And taking care of yourself the same way that you would your team or other people. Like, I have standing meetings with people every week. And then I realized really about in January, it's like, well, I don't have standing meetings with myself. So I started having daily meetings with myself where I'm able to read or work on gratitude or just things that I realize that when I go to work and I'm in these meetings later, things come out of me because I've also taken the time to put them into myself earlier in that day to slow down and feel things and think through things strategically.
Finality of saying, I'm going to book time with myself and I'm going to hold a meeting with myself, and basically making that type of a priority. And a lot of people feel like, I don't have time for that. Well, why not? Like, what are you saying yes to instead? Or where do you have inefficiencies because you haven't made the time? You know, we got to sharpen the saw, the old, I guess it was Lincoln or whatever. And it's really this thing that I find that a lot of leaders eschew this time to reflect because it feels non-productive. It feels like, well, it's not technical. It's not moving things forward. And I think we've really got to get over that notion. Our mind is the asset. You know, we're the vehicle, if you will, for our teams. We create the environment for them. And if we don't recognize something about ourselves, yeah, that's a big problem. So it sounds like that comes up in your coaching a lot.
Oh, a ton. And I talked to someone recently and I said, okay, I get up every day at 5:45 a.m. to have this meeting. And they said, oh, really? I said, I felt the same way when I did it to myself. But then I found when I would visualize things and think through my day and think through my schedule, I was able to get practice and mental reps on what I wanted to have done throughout the day. And now it's a thing where it's like, oh, I don't care if it's the weekend. I don't care if I'm on vacation. Like, I have to do it. Like, I'm looking every night I go to bed, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get up and like work on myself in these ways.
You tell some jerk scheduled a meeting with me at 5:45 a.m. Can you believe it? Oh, who would do that to you? Oh, I did. I did it to myself, actually.
I had my calendar blocked and everything, and they still scheduled it. Yeah.
Exactly right. But it's one of those things, like you said, I also like that you're saying that, you know, as you got used to it, it can, if you don't have like a reflective practice or you haven't done a lot of self-awareness work, it can be a little unsettling, I've found. You know, I teach self-awareness as well. And it's simply one of these things where it can feel like you're rolling around in a little bit. And that's how it's supposed to feel. So I feel like I really like that you said that at first it was kind of like developing a new muscle, right? You're just a little sore and you're kind of, but over time you come, I love what you said. You look forward to it. My morning stack, as James Clear would call it, you know, same thing. I love my morning stack of iced coffee and reading and meditation, reflection. And I have now, for the first time, started to book time to look at my calendar. Where am I spending my time? What was happening if I didn't adhere to the time the way I thought? Like, you know, these practices that you're talking about. It's so cool.
It's a great practice.
Well, I'll move us on to another layer in your 3-part framework here, which is around leading others. And I think this is probably what most people think of when they think of leadership. It's like, okay, I have to show up and I'm going to get other people to do stuff and like all this great. But you mentioned to me in this particular parlance that as leaders, we operate within systems, which is something that I don't find that a lot of leaders naturally think about. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. But at the same time, as leaders, we contribute to being part of those systems. We shape those systems, if you will. So how do you think about systems and help us think about, you know, for, let's say we're a first level manager or maybe a manager of managers, what role do systems play in how we show up and how we lead others?
Yeah, I learned this through my own experience, and then also watching other people that I thought were really great leaders, and I think are really great leaders too, Matt. But they went out to some of these places and then ultimately got dismissed or failed or got fired. And I was like, what's the gap? Because I know they know a lot of the strategies, and I know that they even have a great self-awareness practice. I'm like, what's the gap? So I'm finding that the leading others is really understanding the context of the organization. And so there are some tools out there, like it's an old one now, it's older than me, but like the McKinsey 7S model has been around for a while, where it's like you're talking about strategy and structures and shared values. Yeah, the buzzword that we all talk about or hear about now is like culture. It's like, oh, culture is not made with a pizza party. It's like, yeah, but all of these things together is the context in which you're leading in. And if you don't have that context, then you're going to be misaligned. So all the coaching I do, and I've seen it in all sorts of different companies I've personally been in, is in smaller, normally owner-led organizations, in which case this is talking about knowing those shared values of the company. Because if you're out of alignment with senior leaders, you could be doing a lot of really great things, but not moving the company in the direction that it wants to be going, which is where you feel friction and kickback and stress and pain and, all the different conflicts that come because you're trying to push maybe some great intentions, but if they're out of alignment, it won't work.
Yeah, and it's so true. And a lot of times when you think about something like culture or values, sometimes these are explicit, and we can, maybe they're even on our website, they're on the wall, they're on a coffee mug, who knows? And hopefully they're good. Let's not take shots at the ones who are not good. Just copy paste. But let's assume they're good. But there's still this unwritten set also, where how does the work really get done? And I always say culture is what we reward and punish. And this is where you start to see these incongruencies, right? Where it's like we're going to be innovative, but we're really afraid of making mistakes. We don't want to look bad. So all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I don't see that on the website, or my coffee mug doesn't say like punish me for making a mistake. It says innovation. So that creates that sort of misalignment. And you're like, oh geez, it's something about myself. Maybe here's back to self-awareness. I don't want anybody to think that we have messed up. So I'm leaning on my team and I'm suppressing any mistakes. That's actually in conflict with innovation, which requires some level of experimentation and mistakes. So it happens to leaders all the time.
Yeah, trying to have people or leaders in those situations, to your point, see what's rewarded. But then I also try to coach through and say, okay, what is the idea that runs the meeting? What ideas are heard? Because we've all sat in meetings where it's like, oh, that's a good idea. And then everyone just kind of blows past it. And it's like, well, why did nobody listen to that idea? That was a really great idea. But it doesn't maybe align with some of those, the values that aren't on the poster.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And a lot of times I really got into this values attunement sort of concept a little bit, where a lot of times you're not asked to give up your own personal values, even though you're trying to adhere to some level of team or company values. So there's this rich mix of values and beliefs that are kind of happening in the background, and they're guiding our behavior because they're, where I come from, beliefs guide our thoughts and our emotions. So values play an important role in that. And then you've got this complex cocktail of stuff happening, and somebody whose value is, quality or customer service doesn't want mistakes, but somebody else who's on the vanguard and they want innovation and they're trying to push us to, adopt AI and come up with new product features. It's like, it's just competing values. And it's really, really wild stuff.
And it's how, in that context piece is also how a lot of communication. So like when especially middle managers, like to your point, senior leaders, owners of companies, they often have the largest influence on how that culture thrives and works. So this is where like I try to teach the middle management piece, because they can sometimes only make their immediate bubble or people within arm's length of them safe within just all of their values. Like you said, they can control some things. Like, yeah, they can control things within arm's length, but they're still part of this bigger system where things still do need to be aligned.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we abdicate our responsibility as leaders to lead with our values across the system. So a lot of times it comes to me, I get the question, is it okay to coach another manager's people? Whoa, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one. And it kind of depends on the culture. But ideally, I think it is okay if you do it from a place of integrity, right? You're not like overstepping. And at the same time, you're making sure that the manager stays in the loop about what's happening. But with if we really want cross-functional collaborative workspaces where we're breaking down silos, we have to be prepared to lead others, even when those aren't our direct report org chart others. And I think that I've always tried to be transparent about that and not sort of absolve myself of that responsibility to some extent. And I've never been disappointed at the result. So it's like the system sometimes isn't even just our hyper local system. There's so many interfaces with other departments. I'm not saying you're going to give somebody else a performance review. That's not your job. But to provide a little bit of coaching, especially recognition, holy cow, like, hey, that was really great what you did. It really helped my team all day long, right?
Yeah, I love that you said the word transparency, because that is the thing when you're coaching someone else's person, to be transparent also with that person. Say, hey, I worked with your person and I told them they were great. And then they can also share in some of that gratitude or share in some of those things with you, where otherwise, if it's not transparent, it can feel like things are in the dark. And then there's people, if the motive isn't clear, most people assume the wrong one. So
Yeah, it's
just
fill in the
making sure
blank,
you're
right?
transparent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I tell you that the more I've done it, and that you always, again, try to do it from a selfless perspective, I try to do it in a positive, constructive way, almost without fail. I can't even think of a time now that I'm kind of on the spot here, putting myself on the spot, that they haven't said thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for coaching them. I'm working with them on that. It's great for them to hear another voice. They really respect you because you're old, you've been here forever, or whatever they say. And you're like, okay, great. I'm glad that was helpful. So it's like, I think when we sidestep that opportunity, and I would even call it our responsibility, we weaken the system. That's a long way of what I was trying to get to. When you're talking about systems, we participate in them, we have to be aware of them, but we also get to shape them probably in more ways than we sometimes give ourselves credit.
Absolutely.
But I'll bring us to the third one in your system, which is in your framework, which is all about leading with impact. And I just love, love, love how you point out how common it is the leaders are navigating some sort of change. Could be AI, could be economic headwinds, could be changes in consumer preferences. We see all kinds of stuff, multi-generational, all of it, hybrid work, et cetera. But what are some of the special considerations, Aaron, that leaders need to be mindful about or take whenever we're in this time of change?
Yeah, when change is moving at a quick rate right now. I recently read an article that they said anyone's job from 2015 to now, they've had to probably add 25% new skills. But from now to 2030, they're expecting that number to go up to 68%, meaning we're going to be learning and changing things at a quick rate. So I find that leaders need to always be learning, but more importantly, when they're leading change within their teams, I always tell leaders, you need to make sure that your people are aware and that they care. And those are the two pieces that I keep finding over and over again, because I find that senior leaders often just say, here's the new thing. Manager, make sure they go train them, build a training program, go train them. And then we show up with the training and the person says, why do I need to learn this? Why do I care about this? And they often don't. And so I think Daniel Pink has a book where he talks about motivation, and the three things that drive like intrinsic motivation is purpose. So knowing something bigger than you, mastery, the ability to want to go and learn something for yourself, and then also autonomy. So you have some voice and choice in how it works. And so when we show up with just, here's the change, it's, you got to do it. You strip all the reasons why someone could be motivated. And then you also say, why aren't they learning the training? It's really hard to learn something that you don't care about learning. And so, yeah, just managing it so your teams are aware and that they care. And I find that those two things can make change management happen quickly.
I think that it's ironic to me that with every new generation that enters the workforce, we're seeing this trend towards a higher expectation and interest in autonomy. Every group, and I think it's natural, I think, to understand why. I mean, when you think about our control over our environment, if you were a silent generation person, you didn't have a lot of tech, you didn't have a great quality of life. Like, you just kind of were told what to do, and you kind of did it. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification. But today, like if you're a beta baby, I can't imagine what your world is going to be like. But even now, for Generation Alpha that hasn't quite entered the workforce just yet, I mean, these kids can Google anything. They've got AI now. They can solve their own problems. They can have anything shipped to their doorstep in one day. Uh, it just seems to me that it's natural that people are like, I want to do it. I want more. I want more autonomy. And to your point, if we just say, here's the change, go make it, go do this, and you strip out that autonomy, the mastery, the purpose, you're like, well, fine. Like, if you want that done, like, why did you even bother having me do it? Right. So it's like, you got to you got to write them back into the change story at the individual level. And I think that's something every manager needs to do. So I think that's astute observation on your part for sure.
Yeah, there, because of those tools you mentioned, like with AI and some of these pieces, uh, leaders don't always know the best way to do things. Like I've had some leaders come to me lately and say, okay, what's the playbook on how to use AI? I'm like, well, it's Tuesday. By Thursday, it's going to be different. So there's not this set SOP that I can go follow to do these things, where I find like the people on your team, there are some studies that show like individuals that know how to do these things can actually outperform teams that don't know how to do these things. So like a single person with autonomy and tools can do more things than a group of people without those same tools and skill sets today. So that level of autonomy can really make a positive impact on changes you're trying to make.
Yeah, and if you're listening in and you're thinking about what Aaron just said, the truth is that if that one person who's got the want to and they've got the access to the tools can do this, eventually that's going to become the expectation and the norm. A group of thoughtful humans working together collaboratively towards shared goals and these types of things will outperform, aggregate individuals, for lack of their term, all the time. But there are times when these technological advances or some sort of change makes it so it's not the case. And we're seeing that in software engineering right now, for example, where a single coder who really adopts AI tooling, for example, might really leap up their productivity to the point where it can be like multiples. That won't always be the case, but there are times when that becomes possible, which is
Yeah.
pretty wild.
So when you check in with your people about change and say, here's the change that's coming, here's how we're hoping it affects your life in a positive way, or it might even affect your life in a negative way, but I want to be transparent about like, here's where we're going. What do you think about it? And then you check in with them and say, what do you think? And then when you give them some autonomy in it, they can actually speak back into that change, and then it's more effective for everybody.
So we've had the three layers here of leading yourself, leading others, and leading with impact, but you don't treat these isolated as three legs of the stool, so to speak. You really preach integration as well. And I know that most development programs are like, well, let's go deep on one of these things in isolation. Why do you talk about integration so much? And what happens if there's gaps in one of the areas relative to the others?
Yeah, I find that, it's a great question, because I have found that it takes all three of these things in unison for sustainability and long-term leadership. Any leader, I think, can go in small spurts with one of these things missing and maybe look effective and be a flash in the pan. But if you're missing any of these things, if you don't lead yourself, or you don't know how to lead others or lead with impact, one of those things will always catch you. And so again, I saw great leaders that seemed to be failing, and I couldn't figure it out until I thought, oh, all these things have to work. So like I've seen someone who knows every change management tool, they have the degree from the fancy place, and they've been part of the organization for 10 years. They know how to lead others, but there's something in their own self-awareness that's just massively blind to them. And it's like, well, you talk over everyone and you belittle them, and they don't want to work with you. So although you know all the stuff and you know the company, you're going to fail. And I've seen the same thing where someone who's wildly self-aware and they know the organization and everybody loves them, but they haven't taken the time to learn the strategies and how change management works. And they kind of turn off their learning bucket and say, okay, now I'm a manager, I don't need to learn this stuff anymore. Then it still comes down and ultimately makes them unsuccessful in that role.
As you're describing it, what came to me is a vision of like a car. And you're like, you can focus on, getting yourself ready to race, but lack of self-awareness is like having a muddy windshield. It's like, oh no, that's a problem. Or, not being able to manage others is like having a piston out on the on the engine, so to speak, or having a flat tire. No, I can't lead with impact where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And then you're like, any one of these things is going to keep you from going as fast as you want to go. So you've really got to make sure everything's working. It's a 21-point checklist or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and there could be times where it just slows you down, but it is like, it's almost like not going to the dentist. Like it slows you down for a little bit, but if you ignore that thing, especially at the rate things are changing, like what did I read recently, Matt? But like the number of managers, a lot of companies are flattening organizations, which means the managers that are there are having more people. So if the average was 8 to 10 people on a team, now those numbers are going up to maybe 10 to 20 a team. And so whatever that kind of blind spot is, once you start having to manage more people, it grows. And so whatever you don't solve now becomes a bigger problem later.
That's such a great point. Like that, it really amplifies sort of our weaknesses if we get overwhelmed because now we've got so many direct reports, and it has human consequences too. I think when we have those blind spots, not only are we less performant, we hurt people, and I think it's all the more incentive, depending on how you're wired, to make sure we're doing the things, Aaron, that you're teaching us, and make sure we get it right. But I know you do a lot of your teaching too, and your coaching through Instagram. You create a lot of great videos. You're taking advantage of platforms that didn't even exist when a lot of traditional leadership programs were kind of created. So I wonder how you've been finding social media. Like, what do you think about its potential and the future of leadership? What drew you to it, and what have you seen?
It's been really fun for me because if you've worked with the managers, I know you have, Matt, but if anyone's worked with managers for any length of time, the number one thing is always, I don't have time to do anything. I don't have time. And so I've had leadership development programs where I built where it's like, okay, this is going to add 4 to 8 hours a week, 4 to 8 hours a week for your schedule. And people are like, oh my gosh. Now, if you have that kind of time to dedicate, you can make a lot of progress really quickly, but most people don't. And so I find that it has to be really time efficient. So even for me, like on Instagram, I try to give daily tips that are sometimes under 12 seconds. Most of the time they're under 10 seconds, Matt. But it's an hour-long class boiled down to the one point and maybe something funny about it.
That's pretty cool. I think, giving the people what they want, that's really, really important to be able to do that. So it's like, how do we take advantage of these new tools and these new capabilities in a way that's really going to allow them to kind of pull that through?
Yeah, because people learn in small chunks and then they learn in repetition. And so even giving some of these things, I had a silly one the other day, Matt, and I said, hire good people. That's the tip. Make sure you slow down and hire good people. Because I said the best way to fire Frank was to never hire Frank. And I got several messages that said, oh my gosh, I have a Frank. I sped through it. Now I have this person, and now I'm in months of pain. And because you highlighted that for 4 seconds today, it's now on the front of my brain. So I'm going to handle the Frank situation and make sure I don't do it again. It's like, yeah, that's all I can handle today when I'm working a 10-hour day and I'm stressed out. 4 seconds is about all the time I have for development, or so it feels today.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to, you get it in there in a way that's convenient. It actually hits them at a time when maybe things are a little bit quieter. They're consuming some social, and because they still might want to be in learning mode, but they're like, I just need a break from my normal work. Then they see you on the screen, you give a good tip, and you're like, man, Aaron made a good point there. That does apply. I'm going to go check that out.
Go back from their lunch break with just a little bit of insight.
Yeah, a little micro doses. I like it a lot. So, well, I tell you what, Aaron, I like to ask my guests a trivia question. So you and I are going to be a team. We have this thing called, are you smarter than AI? Right? So I don't know the question. I don't know the answers, but I know that you've been in the real estate business and you teach people about how to be successful agents, et cetera. So I thought I'd get us a question on new home buying. So I don't know. We're going to say, so audience, get ready. We're going to play along at home. When a buyer and a seller agree on a price for a home, what is the initial good faith deposit called that the buyer provides to show their commitment? Is it A, a security deposit, B, escrow, or C, earnest money? Ooh. Interesting.
C, earnest money would be my answer.
C, earnest money, I think. I've never even heard of such a thing, Aaron. Okay. Audience, if you're playing along at home, you can lock in your answer. Do you think that the good faith deposit, is it a security deposit? Is it escrow? Is it earnest money? We went with C, earnest money, and that is the correct answer. Yes. That is the deposit. It's typically a security deposit is typically associated with rentals. Escrow is third party that holds the earnest money and other documents during the transaction, but it is earnest money. Very nice.
Ooh, yeah. All my real estate friends would have been pretty disappointed in me if I had missed that. So I'm glad
we were a team. See, this is the part.
We got it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Holy cow. Audience, I hope you got it right too. But Aaron, I've got an even better question for you than what the heck is earnest money. And that is this: where can my audience go to learn more about you, about your fantastic newsletter, all the great things that you're up to?
The fastest way to find me is just lead from within on Instagram. All of my links are on there, all the TikTok, YouTube, even the newsletter link. You can sign up for the newsletter just right there on Instagram.
Love it. Well, listeners, I'm going to have that link for you in the show notes. You can connect with Aaron. You can learn about all the great stuff he's putting out, his 3-part framework, all these excellent insights. They absolutely translate, and regardless of industry, I think we're all in this together trying to learn how to produce the best possible results for our business and for our people, our teams, when it comes to practicing this craft. So Aaron, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your insights. I've really enjoyed it.
Of course, it was my pleasure.